Okay, Gary, it's so good to connect with you. Where I would love to start, if it's okay with you, I'm curious, what did your parents do for a living, and how did that maybe impact some of the decisions that you made in your career?
Yeah, thanks. Great to be with you, mate. Yeah, my dad was born in 1907. Interestingly enough, he worked for the same company for 50 years, from when he was 15 to when he was 65. And back then, he started as what was called a fitter and turner in Australia. And he finished up as being an engineer. The things I loved about Dad, Dad said, a man's word is a man's bond, a fair day's work for a fair day's pay, and Dad was always on time. So he was quite a disciplined guy. My mum was born in 1914. She actually lived till she was 99 years and 9 months old. She only passed away about 10 years ago. And she was a stay-at-home mum in those days, but she was also a seamstress. So she used to make clothes, and all of this was in Australia. What I learned from my mum, and I wrote about it in the book. There's a chapter in the book that's titled "Even the Queen Sits Down to Pee," and the whole message behind that was, don't get too big for your boots, Gary. Everybody is entitled to what we're entitled to in life, and she was an adventurous too. Mum was always the one that was, you better give it a go. So it was really interesting to have both of those wonderful people in my life.
It's amazing. I was going to ask you, like, maybe one of the lessons that you learned from your parents that you instilled in your kids. Do you have kids?
Yeah, I do. I have a son and a daughter, and then through my second
Grandkids?
marriage, another son and a daughter, and we got grandkids as well. So all that's happening.
Okay, that's amazing. When I saw the title of that chapter, it made me think of humility. And would you say that maybe that's something that your mom instilled in you?
Yeah, absolutely. Humility is a great way to describe it.
Okay. Since we're there, let me just read this off. I love something that you said, and this is the way that you described yourself. Maybe if you're giving a keynote speech, you'd say, "I'm just a traveling salesman from down under." That's what you used to say, and then it sort of progressed to consciously incompetent, probably wrong, roughly right, chairman emeritus of the WD-40 company. And then sort of went on to say your secret was that you never forgot where you came from, who you were, and who you have come to serve, no matter your title or role. And I mean, what a testament to mom, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to add to the bottom of that statement, and I need all the help I can get.
I love that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think about a lot are the lessons that I learned as a kid, and the jobs that I've had. I know you were talking about some of those jobs in your book. I'd love just to hear in your words, what were some of those jobs and maybe the lessons that you kept with you, even as the CEO of a company, from when you were younger?
Yeah, well, growing up in Sydney, and through the 60s and 70s, I had a number of jobs. I was a paper boy, as we called them in Australia. So I used to sell newspapers after school. A mate of mine and I started a little car washing business where we'd wash cars of professionals in the parking lot. Um, I actually worked on a milk truck delivering milk early in the mornings. Which was pretty interesting. And then, I basically, when I was going through school, I worked in the local hardware store, the local sporting goods store, and the local dry cleaning store. I worked for a chemist shop delivering prescriptions on my bicycle. And I think all of that came down to, we were encouraged as kids to get out there, and we had to, I didn't come from a wealthy family. We were kind of a middle lower class family, and so we had to earn our way along the way. But I think it came, the learning was, you've got to get out there and get amongst it. And that's where I learned the respect of being kind of dependable to people. I tell one story in the book where I was working for the local hardware store manager, and he had a death in the family. And, he kind of threw the keys of the store to me as he ran out the door and said, "Take care of this, I'll be back." And it was really, you have a responsibility. And I think that carried through my career at WD-40, in that, I used to wake up every morning knowing that, I could positively or negatively impact many families. And I took that very seriously. And that's why I spent so much time learning about, the power of having a strong culture within an organization. Um, there's such an opportunity for leaders out there right now to make a positive difference in the world. And we can do it by building cultures where people know they belong, and feel like they belong, know they matter and feel like they matter, and also can make choices without having to, what I call, quack up the hierarchy. So you learn a lot in those early days of growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like the book is almost a guidebook, very practical. Start with, I love this sort of the summaries at the end of each chapter. Do this, don't do that, give this a shot. I see the book framed nicely behind you. Did you have to wrestle with the publisher about the title, or was that your choice? Or tell me about the title.
No, it was my choice, and I didn't have to wrestle. It's interesting the reaction you get. In Australia, dumbass is used as sometimes a recognition of, we say funny things in Australia, but it wouldn't be unusual to say, "Hey, I made you dumbass." In other words, it's a friendly sort of thing. But the reason I wanted the title the way it is that I think dumbassery is your superpower. That's really what's all behind it. And I think one of the major barriers to great leadership is the leader thinks they know it all. And I certainly did not know it all. And I was fortunate enough to, through learning, understand the power of, being able to unlock the brilliance of others. And that's really what our success was. So,
Mm.
no, I didn't have to wrestle with them. And most people, when they say the title, they say, "I love that title."
It's funny. I sent a picture of the book to my mom because my mom uses it in sort of those Australian terms.
Yeah.
And I said, "Hey, mom, like if you wrote a book, I think this would be the title." And then I had the text thread with my family, and everyone was laughing about it. But that's how she uses it too. So I thought that was
Yeah.
really fascinating. Really, it's an attention grabber too for maybe those who
Yeah.
think of it like, oh, okay, like it's actually humility that you've put that title on the cover. You mentioned the ability to like sort of unlock other people in an organization. I think we over index on bad leaders, at least in this country. Do you feel like they're in your consulting, your speaking, your experience? Um, you've talked to so many people, authors, etc. Is there sort of like one or two attributes of leaders that you think, man, if they just got this one thing or these sort of two attributes right, is it micromanaging? Is it not creating psychological safety? Like what are sort of the one or two things that you notice that the leaders often get wrong?
The first one is ego. Their ego eats their empathy instead of their empathy eating their ego. And I think, that, and then there's a natural tendency then for them to be micromanagers. Um, the other one is they have this desire to always be right. And, you're not always right. I mean, you're probably wrong and roughly right, as I said, in most circumstances. And it's amazing how many really don't value the gift of feedback. Once you've entered what I would call corporate royalty, as a lot of people think they are once they get to the position of CEO, they
Untouchable,
seem to,
inaccessible. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they seem to have forgotten that the power and the gift of feedback, which is so powerful. Marshall Goldsmith, who's a dear friend, and I've been fortunate enough to, learn from him over many years. He says, when anybody gives you feedback, there's only two words: thank you. That's all you have to say. Whether you do anything with it or not, that's up to you. But don't create an atmosphere where people don't feel comfortable giving you feedback.
Did you ever in your time do those sort of like 360 reviews where you had to fill something out and you got the feedback? Did you ever have any I know you call these like learning moments, but were there some aha moments that you ever got from those over the years?
Oh, absolutely. You know, at the beginning of my career at WD-40 company as CEO, I think I was in my second year as CEO. I went back to school and I did a master's degree in leadership at the University of San Diego. And the first course in that was a really intense course of understanding as who you are as a leader. And it was kind of like a 360 on steroids. And I learned a lot about myself. If you're aware of the DISC model at all, I was a turbo D, which was basically be brief, be bright, and be gone was the way I used to, interact with people. And that hit me square in the face because if that's the way I was going to handle people, then I wasn't going to benefit from, their knowledge and what they had to offer. And then you have learning moments along the way. One of the other ones, and Marshall Goldsmith calls it adding too much value, but someone would come with a problem or a solution or an idea, and I'd be tempted, even though I thought it was a pretty good idea, that I needed to put my fingerprints on it and add a little more value. What I actually did was add very little value, but decrease motivation significantly because now the person didn't really own the idea of the innovation. So I think that those sort of areas, you learn as you get a little smarter as a leader to have what I call bleeding tongue syndrome. You have to bite your tongue, and let the ideas and stuff come out.
I've never heard that one, but I like it. So your time at WD-40 until you were sort of ended your tenure as CEO was about 35 years, give or take.
But yeah, no, it was 35 years in
Yeah.
total, 25 years as CEO.
Okay. I imagine there were many times where you could have doubled your salary, at another company and gotten recruited. And I think, through the lens of career advice, sometimes we think the grass is often greener. I'm wondering what kept you there.
Um, I really loved the opportunity to grow as we do. Firstly, it was a wonderful brand to work with. And, when I was given the privilege and the opportunity to lead as CEO, we had a dream. And the dream was we wanted to take the blue and yellow can with the little red top to the world. And I didn't, any opportunity that came to me outside WD-40 didn't give me the opportunity to experience the world the way I was experiencing at WD-40 Company. We were taking the brand to different cultures, different countries. I sometimes used to jokingly say, I think I'm just a subsidized tourist here because I was, I got the, I've visited 76 countries around the world, and having the opportunity to learn those cultures, interact with those people, that was very exciting. But also, about 5 years into the role, as we started to really gain momentum around building a great culture, I could see the positive impact we were making on people's lives. And I found that really, really rewarding. You know, we, it was something that I don't think you get the opportunity to see, too many times in life. And to watch people who would join us at, a lower level in the organization and who were really excited about development, and we wanted to support them and end up in, senior leadership roles over a period of time, was really, really rewarding. So, and also, when I joined the company way back when, my dad said, "You can't go wrong with that stuff, son." So I thought I should listen to Dad.
Nice. So you talk about something called learning moments. How do you define that?
Yeah. Well, what is the purpose of a learning moment? Number one, the purpose of a learning moment is to take away one of the most negative emotions we have, which is fear. So why would you want to be in an organization that talks about failure and fear all the time, But in reality, every success is built on a failure. So we said, let's think about not a failure, but a learning moment. And the definition of a learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. So, if you're working on something in the organization and you have a positive learning moment, a breakthrough moment, a breakthrough learning, then let's amplify that across the organization so we can really benefit from what that was. And the flip side of that, if you're working on something or you have a discovery about something that's not as successful, let's amplify it throughout the organization so we don't have to have hundreds of people, exploring the same learning moment. So it was a very powerful mindset within the organization that there wouldn't be a meeting you would go to or an interaction you would go to that you wouldn't hear someone say, I had a learning moment about that. May I share it with you? So it became a very powerful, powerful part of our organization.
I love that story you told. I think it was a perfect illustration. I think it was like Thomas Watson at IBM. Somebody made a $600,000 mistake and they said, "Are you going to fire him?" And he said, "Why would I fire him? Like, why would I give that learning lesson to anybody else? That's a competitive advantage for us."
Yes, exactly true. Exactly.
So I read that you launched sort of like a learning moment contest with the employees
Mhm.
for a year. I'd love to hear, like, how did that go? How was that received? You talk about impacting others as one of the things that you're most proud of. And I imagine that contest, I mean, you saw the sort of feedback come in, that's really impacting people's lives.
Well, yeah, the purpose of it was, when I started initially talking about, hey, we're not going to punish people for making mistakes around here. We're going to have learning moments. I kind of heard echoes in the background. Yeah, sure. You know, it was a natural way for people to be. Can I trust, that if I disclose this negative learning moment, I'm not going to be, publicly assassinated? So I said, okay, well, what I have to do, or what we have to do as an organization, is win the trust of people, right? To give them. So I said, okay, we're going to have a contest, and I'd love you to share with me your learning moments, and we're going to have a monthly prize, and at the end of the year, we're going to have a grand prize. Someone's going to win a business or first class trip around the world with their husband, wife, or significant other to visit our offices. So bring on the learning moments. And in the first month, I got 4. It's like, oh, okay, this is interesting. So what did I do with those 4? I made heroes of them because they were brave enough to come forward. And the next month, I got, let's say, 8. And what did I do? I made heroes of them. And by the time we got to the 6th month, of course, people were now not worried about oh, yeah, we're going to get punished. They were worried about not being the hero. And so we started to get hundreds of these. So the learning moment of the learning moment exercises, in any change situation, there are personal concerns and information concerns. And if you don't solve for those personal concerns or those information concerns people have, you will not be able to implement the change. So the first part of that program was to solve that personal concern that people had, which was, oh, I'm afraid that if I do get really involved here, I'm going to step into something I don't want to be involved with. So that was the learning moment of the learning moment.
Yeah, you don't want the negative learning moment on your review,
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
interesting. Okay, I can go in so many directions here, Gary. One of the things I think about, and I always forget to ask this question, so I'll ask it to you now. But when you think about sacrifice, from where you were and where you got to professionally, do you think about that? Like, I just, that I have to sacrifice time at my kids' sports games, or like, how do you think about sacrifice? How should leaders think about that as they are growing?
Well, if you are making a contribution to something that's not worthy, then I would call it a sacrifice. But if you are making a contribution to something that is worthy, I would call it a contribution, not a sacrifice. So, of course, you have to live, your purpose in life, and, your purpose as a parent or a father or a husband or a wife is a little different to the one at work. So I think you have to have awareness of that. And, my kids benefited from the work that I did. They got to see the world. They got to do things. I remember early times before there was internet or email. I'd be traveling up into Asia, and we'd have a fax machine at home. And if my son would come home from school with something he wanted to be proud of, he'd fax it to me at a hotel, and I'd write him a note and send it back. So I think it's not sacrifice at the cost of exclusion. It's you've got to be deliberate about what you do. But I think that to be able to do what we did was really, really not sacrifice. We were making a contribution. But I think you've got to balance it. You've got to understand where you're putting your energy and what season of your life.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think you talk a lot about values, and I imagine these values help shape some of those life or business decisions that you make. And there's a couple of things that really stood out to me. You said values set people free. I've got to unpack that. I've never heard that. Values set people free. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, I said that values are in place to protect people and set them free. And what I mean by that, and in an organization, people don't people don't want to have to quack up the hierarchy every time they need to make a decision. And one of the things that was very clear to us is as we were expanding around the world, in reality, the sun would never set on the blue and yellow can with a little red top. Somewhere around the world, every minute of the day, someone in our organization would need to make a decision. So how do we empower them to do that? Well, through a lot of learning I got from my mentor, Dr. Ken Blanchard, it was if you have a hierarchical set of values, in other words, a set of values where the first one is more powerful than the last one, and you clearly define what that value means, anybody in the organization should be able to make any decision at any time, anywhere in the world. So that was our goal. So we had a hierarchical set of values. The first value was we value doing the right thing. The second one was we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. And so it went on. And they were there so that wherever you were in the world, if you had to make a decision, as long as you rested on our values, you could make that decision and you would always be supported.
Do you have a story that sort of illustrates a decision sort of being guided by those values that comes to mind?
Yeah. This story is roughly right. A person working
I'll take it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because the details, but this person worked in the supply chain at WD-40 company, and they had the ability to make decisions around some of the ingredients that would go into our products. And one day, salesman X from company fill in the blank came along and said, hey, I've done some work on your formulation and there's an ingredient that you're using and we have an alternative to that. Efficacy-wise, it's just as good. In fact, I might even say it's a little bit better. And I've done some sums and some math on this, and my estimate is that if you were to replace the ingredient you're using with my ingredient or my component, you could probably drop $3 to $4 million to your bottom line. Now, I think you're going to be pretty excited about that because you're a public company, right? And this could be the day that after our meeting, you run up to your CEO and you get that promotion. You're going to be Employee of the Month, whatever. And the person said, that sounds pretty interesting. Tell me more about that. And they had the conversation went on. He said, but there's just one other thing that you need to know, and don't worry about it. Because what I'm going to share with you is common business practice. You just have to put a little warning on the can. And it says, contents of this can in the state of California are known to cause cancer. It's called a Prop 65 warning. Oh, mate, you would have seen them everywhere. And the guy says, geez, I'm sorry, I can't do it. So what do you mean? You are a public company. You're about profitability. This is a big deal for you. Everybody else does it. No, I can't do it. Our number one value is we value doing the right thing. Our number two value is we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. Cancer doesn't cause positive, lasting memories. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to take you up on that offer. But wait a minute, wait a minute. This is, it's one of your values is you value sustaining the WD-40 economy. That's profitability. He said, yeah, but that's our number six value. One and two are more powerful than six. Well, look, you obviously don't understand. I need to go and talk to someone else in the organization. This person can say, you can talk to anybody you like, anywhere in the world, and you're going to get exactly the same answer because I was able to make that $3 to $4 million decision. In fact, when I run up to the CEO's office and tell him I just didn't save us $4 million because I lived our values, then I'll be employee of the month.
Wow. How was it for you when you heard about that? Were you like kind of proud, like not only did we implement it, but people are actually, leveraging it? Because sometimes you
Yeah,
just
we
see
loved
values on
it.
a wall, right? I mean, oftentimes like people don't even know what the values of their own company are.
I know. That's why we embedded them in our discussions with our people. We used to formally sit down with every member of our tribe on at least minimum 90 days and have them talk about how they're progressing about getting an A, because we used to say, we're not here to mark anybody's paper. We're here to help them get A's in the organization. But also, we'd have them share with us, how did you live our values in the last 90 days? Give us examples of at least two of the values. So living the values became part of the culture. Now we only had two measurements of the values. You either lived them or you visited them. And when we didn't want a lot of visitors, and it's interesting you say up on the wall, in the latter part of my time at WD-40, we built a new facility in San Diego, and we actually put these six values up on a wall, and the folks in the company were laughing because they're going to say, Gary's not going to like that too much. He says our values should be on coffee-stained pieces of paper. And that's true. But I said, we can do that because it'll remind us and we can talk about them. But we actually, lived our values every day.
That's amazing. So a couple of things you mentioned, Ken Blanchard. Tell me. I'm sure you can talk about him for days, but for those who might not be super familiar with Ken Blanchard, author of the 1 Minute Manager, but what are a few things that you've really come to appreciate over the years in terms of some of the lessons that we should be aware of?
Ken is the guru of servant leadership. He's the ultimate. His ultimate belief is there's goodness in anybody if we can bring them out. He said, God didn't make any junk, is what Ken said or says. And I met Ken in 1999. Is when I enrolled in this master's degree at the University of San Diego. He was one of the foundation designers of this program. And I went to an information session and Ken was talking and Ken said, most MBA programs get people in the head. We got to start getting people in the heart. And he was so right. So, Ken is 85 or 86 years old now. In fact, I was visiting with him on Sunday and we're very dear friends. And he is just someone over the years that I ended up serving on the board of his company for 10 years. How lucky am I to be able to sit there and listen and learn from all of the Blanchard work. But, if you look at the books he's written, Whale Done, High Five, it's all about how do you recognize the goodness in others and bring it out of others. So I think it was, it was just, I owe so much to Dr. Ken Blanchard, and not the least to say his work as the 1 Minute Manager.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay. I'm going to pivot slightly. We talked about values, but one of the things that really stood out, I don't want to miss, you talk about creating psychological safety in a company. To me, that's one of the most important things when I think about why people leave companies, right? It's usually one of three things, right? They got fired or laid off, they decided to go somewhere else, etc. But one of the big reasons is psychological safety. If you don't feel safe at work, and I've been in situations like this where it could eat at you, right? It's the type of thing that that it's like stress, right? When you get burnt out, it's they used to say like it's like a tea kettle, right? You don't really notice it until you have a panic attack or something happens. And I think psychological safety is hugely important. What do you tell leaders about psychological safety and maybe how to go about creating it?
Well, I think it's a balance between care, and care in an organization is we love and care our people enough, not only to reward them and applaud them for doing great work, but to be brave enough to redirect them, not protecting our own comfort zone at the expense of other people's development. So I think that psychological safety is about care and trust. And trust is doing what you say you're going to do. You know, I often say in organizations, people don't lie, they fake and hide. And the reason they fake and hide is because of fear, or because the leader is being that, soul-sucking CEO who must always be right, and nobody has the chance to share and say what they say. But also it's showing you care about people. The first chapter of the book is, are you okay? And how often do we ask people in an organization, are they okay? What's on your mind? What's getting in your way? I'm here to help you. Showing people that they matter, is really important. So yeah, authenticity, trust, all of these words are important, but you've got to live them. And leaders need to do that, because the fish rots from the head, simply as that. And, if you're going to have an organization where you want to have psychological safety or trust, well, you better live that as the leader. Otherwise, no one's going to believe you.
The only thing I'm going to remember is the fish rots from the head. So I love these like sayings. You mentioned care, and you talk about 4 pillars of frictionless free culture. One of them being care, candor, accountability, responsibility. What's the hardest one to get right?
I think people get out of step with care. A lot of people think that, caring is a balance between being tough-minded and tender-hearted. And if you go to either end of that spectrum, people feel at risk. So, it's like, do we care and love for our kids? Yeah, we do. But sometimes we got to be a little bit tough-minded as well to set them in the right direction. A really good friend of mine, Ron Carusi, he wrote a book called To Be Honest. And he says that a lot of leaders protect their own comfort zone at the expense of other people's development, which means we're protecting how we feel when we should be caring about the others, both in a positive and, in that way of balance. And then I think responsibility, it's interesting. There's a rampant disease that runs through organizations called the na disease, the finger pointing disease. And you have to, like anything else, you have to have an antidote or a vaccination against that. And we created that. We called it the Maniac Pledge. And the Maniac Pledge was a statement of responsibility. And I can share it with you. It says, I am responsible for taking action, asking questions, getting answers, and making decisions. I won't wait for someone to tell me. If I need to know, I am responsible for asking. I have no right to be offended that I didn't get this sooner. And if I'm doing something others should know about, I am responsible for telling them. Very powerful statement to have in an organization to treat the na disease. Because, people would come to you and say, hey, mate, why didn't I know about that? Well, hang on a minute. It sounds like you did know about it. You did know about it, but you didn't know enough about it. But you knew enough to know about it. So why didn't you go and ask someone so you could know more about it? So, if you've got a pledge or a statement that says, this is what responsibility looks like, there's nowhere for people to hide. Because remember, I say, I don't think people lie. They fake and hide. So you've got to remove hiding places.
That's so on point. I mean, think of any sales and marketing team as well. They blame each other and it's sort of ongoing, but I like the idea of having just like the same baseline of accountability. I had never heard that. I heard this quote that you had put in the book from Simon Sinek. Accountability is hard. Blame is easy. One builds trust. The other destroys it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it.
Absolutely. Love it.
Tell me, when you think about top one, two lessons from Simon Sinek, I'm sure he's learned a ton from you because he references you all the time. What have you learned from Simon that you think is important for other people to know about?
Well, Simon is of course famous for understanding your why, and I think that's really one of the big lessons. But Simon too talks about a touch of optimism. He's such a pragmatic guy. He really does bring out he can simply bring out a point that people go, yeah, I get it, and that's what he did with his start with why. His other work that I love is Leaders Eat Last, where he talks about the line of generals in the military and how they're going to eat last, which is really important around, as leaders, we're not at the beginning of the line. I think it's interesting too. I was joking with someone the other day how you go from being a VIP to a PIP. And a VIP, of course, is a very important person. And you step out of a leadership role and you become a previously important person. So I think, again, you've got to keep that in mind that you are really just one of the people in the organization that helps get things done. So you don't have to be at the front of the line all the time.
That's so good. I always think about what he says, be the leader you wish you had. And I started coaching Little League Baseball recently, and I took I had no idea what I was doing. So it's like a coach's training, and I was talking to the guy who sets up the training, and sort of had a one-on-one, and I kind of mentioned Simon, and I said, I always think of that as a leader at work, and I approach this as be the coach that I wish I had when I was 8 years old, right? Could I be a little more empathetic, a little more fun, during that hour with the kids? I love that. Okay. Did we miss anything so far? Because I can keep pivoting. I've got a few more questions. But anything?
Well, I think we're talking about maybe the foundations of building great cultures and leadership. We talked about the learning moment, which is so important. We talked about the power of values in the organization. The other one is the position you take, and you just brought it up as being a coach. We at the organized WD-40 company, we took the word manager away. Now, and I'll tell you why. You're a first day employee at WD-40. You walk in, I say, "G'day, Omad. I'm your manager." How does that feel? And I don't think I really want to be managed. So it comes down to let's not talk about managing people. Let's talk about being someone's coach. And if you think about a great coach, number one, a great coach knows what it takes to win the game. They understand the game. Number two is they never run on the field and take the ball. In your new role, or take the bat, in your new role as a little league coach for baseball or whatever you're doing, I don't think you want to run in and steal the bat off the player and want to take the swing. No. But what you do is spend a lot of time on the sideline observing the play, so you're able to coach and advise the player how they could play a better game.
Gary, this guy is like a coach whisperer. He's I have all these like sort of isms from him, right? For kids, no more coaching than 20 seconds at a time, right? Things like that. To your point, actually, he says don't coach during the game. These kids have so many things, their sort of brains, they're sort of processing things differently. He actually says, parents, you need to put a muzzle on the parents, because the last thing you want to do is have them coach the kids during the game, right? Yes. So much anxiety can be built up, and it almost makes you a better parent, right? You're thinking about all these things, and you're absolutely right. He says, praise loudly, construct in private quietly. Right? You never want to shame the kids in front of it's funny. I think about like the guy that you were in a meeting with, somebody who maybe just wasn't having a good day and took it out on his peers. And you could have done what most people would have done, and you did the opposite, right? You took a walk with him. You sort of made him laugh a little bit, or you were looking for him in the bushes and he wasn't here, and it
Exactly.
wasn't that. That's not the guy in the meeting that I know. But most people wouldn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great example when I said, the you I know and love was not in that meeting today. But the other thing a great coach does is they spend a lot of time in the stinky locker room. And I think there's a big thing about that is as a great leader, you are not the elite. How much time do you spend getting your shoes dirty with those that you lead? Do you have your coffee brought to you in the office because you're corporate royalty, or are you down there in the canteen, cafeteria, and break area lining up to the cafe bar machine to get your coffee so you can have a chat with the people in the line as well and learn something from them?
I'll have to send you this video. I recently interviewed somebody who used to play for Pete Carroll, the football coach for the Seahawks, and at USC. He played in both leagues for him, in college and professionally. He said, Pete's saying kind of reminds me of you. He said, do it better today than it's been done before. And I know that that's similar to one of the sayings that you have, right?
Yeah.
Just getting continuously better. And he would say, Pete could have probably, in theory, in air quotes, won maybe a couple more games in his career if he micromanaged and ran an even tighter ship. He's known as making practice fun, holding people accountable, but in a different way. And he said, I'll never forget, he said, Pete would not just be on the sidelines, right, on a Monday and Tuesday and during practice. He would be in his cleats running with the players, right? And it's funny. So before the season began, I bought cleats. You're either going to get your shoes all muddy on a baseball field, and my wife's like, those are unnecessary. You don't need baseball cleats. And I just kept thinking of Pete Carroll. Like, yeah, no, I want to be with them. To your point, like in the stinky locker room, but if I'm asking them to run in a certain direction, sometimes I want to make sure that they feel like I'm in it with them, not just, with a whistle on the sideline.
And I think it reminds me of a beautiful example. I was over in China, and we're out in Shanghai, and we're going out to do store checks, which are, visiting the market. And it was a stinking hot day, and we were in a little bus, and the sales guys are there, and I'm getting on the bus, and they say, "Are you coming with us?" And I said, "Yes." And they say, "Oh, Mr. Garry, it's too hot." I said, "Too hot for who? You or me?" And no, for you. I said, "No, no, no. If you're going out there, I'm going out there with you. And that's what we're going to do." And they took a picture of me with like a washcloth on my head with ice because it was that hot. And they laughed about it forever and said, "Look, the CEO's out here on the bus with us." And I said, "Of course. I want to feel what you feel. I want to know what you know. I want to see what you see." I,
That's
I must tell you, it was very uncomfortable, but
yeah.
you got to do it.
I'm sure they appreciated it. One of the things I was thinking about that you talk about is celebrating, and celebrating maybe the right things, not just maybe a product launch or X amount of products sold. And I'm just curious, like how. And there's this quote from Ken Blanchard. He says, "It's a shame that most people only know that they have done a good job because no one yelled at them today. But when you talk to leaders now, how do you advise them about the idea of celebrating, celebrating with employees within your company now versus maybe just celebrating an achievement?"
Yeah. I often say life's a gift, don't send it back unwrapped. So, why don't you do some unwrapping with your people? And, celebrating comes in all different shapes and forms. A celebration is just recognizing people and talking about the little things they did, noticing them, sending little notes out. One of the things in my last year at WD-40, I was over in Europe as kind of a farewell tour, I guess, and I was visiting some of the offices. And I walked into one office, and in one of the cubicles, there was a note pinned up on the wall that I'd written to this person maybe 8 or 10 years ago. And it was meant so much to them that I'd actually handwritten this note, that I thought that's a celebration. So, recognition, celebration, being, authentic about it is so important. And then you celebrate the good things, and sometimes you have to celebrate things that are not so good as well.
Yeah. It's amazing how I think we tend to forget the weight of our words
Yes.
about other people. I'm one of my favorite bosses I've ever had. He said something really nice to me to someone else in an email. It's just the way he described and sort of complimented me. I printed that out. I used to have it in my office, and like whenever I would sort of doubt myself, or maybe my confidence was shot, I would always look at that. I told him
Yeah,
years later.
absolutely. Yeah, and other thing is, a couple of times I've sent, thank you notes home to someone's special person and said, I want to tell you how much I appreciate so and so. Thank you for lending that person to us for what they do.
I love that. One of the stories that you tell, I'd love to hear it if it's okay, is it's in a chapter titled "Don't Ignore the Alarm Bells." Right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think
yeah.
it's a great metaphor for life. And I think that was sort of the goal of that chapter. It's not just about the story, but it's about recognizing things, before the tea kettle goes off. I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're in London. It's a cold winter's night. I'd flown in, I think, from wherever I'd flown in. And I decided that this night I was going to enjoy some British comedy and have a little bit of takeout food. So I went across the road to the little supermarket across the road. I got myself a beer and a little takeout and was in my hotel room, which I'd stayed in this same hotel, I don't know, for years. And I put my shorts on and those awful fitting flip flops that you get in a room that never fit my feet, and a t-shirt on, and I set myself up and turn on BBC One or Two or wherever it was, and I'm starting to enjoy myself, and the alarm bell goes off. And I did what I normally do. I ignored it. I've been in hotels where alarm bells have gone off before, and my anticipation is someone's going to come over the loudspeaker in a few seconds and say, sorry, that was a false alarm. Anyhow, the alarm bell continues to sound. I'm thinking, boy, this is getting annoying. I wish they'd turn this thing off. And next thing, there's a bang, bang, bang on the door. Mr. Ridge, evacuate the hotel. Oh, wow. So here I am, shorts, t-shirt, flip-flops. I grab my phone and my passport. I run down the stairs and bang, here I am into the middle of, Stratton Street and Berkeley Square in London in the middle of winter, thinking, oh my God, how did I get here? And anyhow, not only that, it started to rain. So, it's like, oh my. Anyhow, a period of time later, they cleared the hotel. Someone had left a backpack out in the foyer or somewhere, and they had concerns about it. So I get back to my room. Now my beer's hot, my curry's cold, I'm freezing. The TV show that I want to watch is gone, and I've had not a very nice experience. So I ended up, getting myself comfortable, and it made me think about, am I listening to the alarm bells that are going off in my life? And, I was flying back in a day or two later, and I was sitting on the plane, and I got a piece of paper out, and I put a column down the middle, and I started to write, alarm bells. And my learning moment there was, there's a lot of stuff going on around us that if we ignore it, it could really hurt us. And it was a great learning moment for me, and that I was able to share with people. And, we then talk about it in meetings from time to time. Are we hearing all these alarm bells? Are we sure? So in my list, I made, and then I, decided which ones were important and decided which ones I was going to do something about and which I wasn't. But it was a wonderful experience, even though uncomfortable, about just paying attention to the alarm bells that are going around you. Then, and if you don't, and they're significant, you may end up out in the cold, where you don't want to be.
What a great illustration for a great lesson. Appreciate you sharing that.
So every time I share it, I think about it.
It's an important one. I mean, I love business books, but especially when they teach you about sort of, just things that impact the other parts of your life, I think are so important. Um, Is there anything in your time as CEO that I don't want to use the word regrets, but anything you would have done differently that comes to mind?
Yeah, yeah, I think I I wish I would have learned to be braver and not protect my comfort zone earlier. There are times when I should have been brave enough to have that crucial conversation, because it would have helped the person. And I was really protecting my comfort zone. So I think that's one thing that I would say is that, be brave enough. If you truly do love and care about your people, and I have an example of that where it became a big aha moment to me. There was someone in the organization that I really, really did think highly of, that I needed to really have a conversation with. And they were a kind of a difficult person to have a conversation with. And I was sitting in my office or somewhere, and I thought, why are you so afraid? If you really do love and care for that person, then you'll have the conversation. But it's you that's stopping you from having that conversation. And that was my aha moment. I said, I'm never going to be in that situation again. And I did. And I opened the conversation with the person. This is going to be pretty a difficult conversation for me. And I've resisted having it because I was protecting me. But what I want to really do is help you. And this is where I want to help you. So I think that it could be, it could be underlined to say, stalling making those decisions that are the right ones.
Yeah, well, it's a great lesson. I appreciate you sharing that. Proudest moment at WD-40.
Wow, there were so many. I think um, multiple moments of being proud when I've seen people really develop in the organization. And I tell that story in the end of the book, a couple of people that, started in certain roles and through their want to learn and grow and our abilities to support them went to new heights in their life. So I think it wasn't the proudest moment wasn't the biggest sales month or the biggest earnings call. I tell you that. That was the outcome, because profit is the applause of people doing great work.
Yeah, it goes. I think about that. There's that highlight reel clip that you have on YouTube somewhere, and Simon Sinek says this is proof that culture can change things because they're not selling shiny something or software. It is a thing in a can with a red top, and this is proof that if you can change culture with that product, you can do it anywhere, right? So I
Yep.
love to hear that. Toughest business decision or tough time that you think about that you learned a lot from?
Well, we've been through some tough times, whether it be the great financial crisis or leading through COVID or whatever. And I think the toughest times are when you're going through times of extreme uncertainty. We can deal with risk, but uncertainty is really hard. And I think in those times, you have to be very clear of what's important. When we went through COVID, um, from day one, we said we're going to concentrate on three things. Number one, the safety and well-being of our people. Number two, serving our customers as best we can. Number three, protecting the underbody of our company so we can thrive when this is ended. And we had to have those three things to focus on because there was so much uncertainty that could have taken us in so many different directions.
Did you have to
So I think
downsize at all, like lay people off?
we never laid anyone off in my 25 years at WD-40 Company. Never.
So, and Simon talks about this. I didn't know I knew that was true maybe in 2008. I didn't want to put you on the spot and didn't think that was true, through COVID. So what do you tell the leaders that, they're sitting in front of you, you're giving a keynote and they're about to lay off 1,000 people here, 1,000 people there? Like, what's your advice to them?
Well, firstly, how did they get in that position of needing to do that? I mean, was it outside forces, inside forces? But, you know, is it better that all of us suffer a little than a few suffer a lot? So, we went through tough times. It didn't mean that we didn't make sacrifices. We did. but we said, let's all suffer a little instead of everybody, instead of a few people suffering a lot. And I admit that one of the, pieces of feedback I often got at the company is we don't have enough people. And I said, yes, but I tell you, we have the right amount of people that even in tough times, we won't have to, lay anybody off. And that doesn't mean people were overworked. It just means we understood that we could time was was finite. In fact, going through COVID, it was January 2021, and I was challenging our team. I said, "Do you think we're draining cultural equity? We're doing everything we can to keep our high level of engagement up, and the things that are important to people." I said, "Let's just do a survey and see where we are." So we went out and we did that, and the results came back, and most of the numbers, in fact, all of them, were equal to where they were in March 2020, except for one, and it went up. And I said, and the question was, I am excited about my place in the company's future. And the score went up. And here we are in January 2021. There is no sign of any confidence that we're going to get out of this thing and COVID and whatever. I said, there must be something wrong with the data. I mean, go back and look at it. They went back and they said, no, it's true. And I said, I got to know why. So inquiring into why did people in the organization, 97% of our people globally said they were excited about their place in the company's future. And when we asked the question why, they said, I feel safe. We are living our just cause of a group of people that come together to protect and feed each other. If I needed to be anywhere, I want to be here. I thought, wow. If we haven't now just tested this culture, then we would never have tested it. And that was probably, now I'm thinking about it, one of my proudest moments.
Wow, I love that. I mean, I feel like you learn more about yourself when your back is up against the wall, and what a moment.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have 5 minutes? I just want to be mindful of your time.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Best career advice you ever got?
It's not about you. It's about the people that you have the privilege to lead.
I know you read a lot of books. But what are a few that you think everyone should read? Could be business, could be not business, whatever comes to mind.
Everything You Need to Know You Learned in Kindergarten by Robert Fulghum is the best business book you'll ever read, because it talks about the simple things. If you go out at night, go with a stranger, pick up after yourself. And in fact, I got that from Ken. Ken Blanchard reads that book every summer, and I do too now, because it reminds me. I love that book. It's a great book. And then, of course, The 1 Minute Manager. In recent times, Ron Carusi's book, which is To Be Honest. I love Chester Elton's work. His book, Anxiety at Work, is a great learning about people with anxiety. I have piles of books around me here in the office, and I'll probably forget. Right Kind of Wrong by Amy Edmondson is another one I really like. Of course, Simon's book, Leaders Eat Last. And in fact, I love The Infinite Game as well, because it's so simple. So there's a bunch of stuff.
Where did Good to Great fall in your sort of?
Yeah. I read Good to Great many, many, many years ago. Level 5 leadership, I guess, when I think about the principles of it, we've talked about a lot of them. But yeah, Good to Great, it's a classic.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, let's say you're talking to someone who's maybe early in their career. They want to make an impact in this world. What are 2 to 3 pieces of general life/career advice you would impart on them?
First one, it's don't let your ego eat your empathy. Have your empathy eat your ego. Be a continuous learner. Life is a learning journey, and then also be a continuous teacher. Your role as a leader is to be a learner and a teacher. So, and practice servant leadership. You know, you're there to serve others, and you'll find that very rewarding.
Fast forward 10 years from now, what do you hope that your kids say about you as a dad?
Um, it's interesting. Um, I would hope that they would say dad's work did what dad wanted it to do, which was help leaders build organizations where people go home happy.
I love it. I appreciate you leaning into this. It's been a lot of fun. I mean, I can go on for hours, but do you feel like there's anything we missed or anything we should add?
We've touched on a lot of all of the little areas, but you're right. You know, we could talk about it for hours, but it's a lot of fun.
Garry, great to meet you. I'm looking forward to putting this together.
Thank you so much for your support, and thanks for being out there and spreading the word. You know, we have an opportunity to make the world a better place, so especially today.
I agree. We read one bad boss at a time, and we need books like this and messages like that. So I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
All right. Have a great one.
You too. Cheers.
Bye.